Coming up on Verse, Chorus, Verse, our 1994 coverage would not be complete if we did not discuss the massive real-life battle being brought on by a musical genre. East Coast versus West Coast? No. I'm talking about a small pocket in Europe where some crazy shit was going down. That's next. Metal fight, power to explode. Energy screams, magic dreams. Satan records their best notes. First Chorus Universe DL here. How's it going? I'm doing very well. I'm here with episode 205 for you. That's right. We're in the 200s. We're deep in the 200s, baby. Just covered 1994 for our fifth and sixth episode, doing Q3 of 94. Man, very, very, very fucking hard quarter. So many good albums. I don't know yet because it hasn't come out, but I am sure that we are getting a lot of flack for our top 10, which is actually my top 10 in Evil's defense. He gave up on it a while ago, but that's okay. There are some that we left out that I'm sure that I've gotten plenty of messages about, and I'm okay with that. Something had to be left on the cutting room floor. When you have hours and hours of brilliant music, it's just going to happen. Hopefully enjoy that. Hopefully you're enjoying the 94 coverage. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. It's kind of crazy. We've got, let's see, I think like 10 episodes until we start our end of year stuff where we try to do the same ones every year. Rachel and I will do an episode on the Beatles. We talk about the albums that we voted best in 2023. We talk about albums that we missed in 2024. We'll revise and revisit some of our old picks from our finales. We'll have some free-form discussion on whatever the hell we want. Last year we had a talk about what is considered offensive and what should be allowed to take place in music. That was a tough and interesting conversation, maybe a little too serious. So I don't know. I initially was thinking we could just do that every year easily because it's intriguing conversation, but maybe it's a little too serious for the likes of this type of pod. Almost as serious as what I'm going to talk about today, which is really, there's very, very serious things that happened. And I will speak very seriously of most of the victims that there are in this, but man, there is a lot of ridiculous shit. And it all stems from music fans, people making music. Boy, we are a ridiculous people in absolute. So I guess I won't waste too much time because I've got a lot to go over. It's just me today. I'm by myself. You know, when I do these kind of whatever half-ass documentary-ish sort of, they can't even call them documentaries. I just study something for a long time and then I blab about it. Rachel and Evil have lives. They don't have time for this shit. Rachel is newly married and going to like Disneyland every other fucking weekend. They're that couple. They're the couple that goes to Disneyland, which I don't... All good, man. And Evil and his fiance go to the places you're supposed to go as an adult. You know, they're going to Banff and fucking the beautiful countryside of Canada and swimming in glacier water and shit. So they're actually doing it right, which is good. Here I am stuck at home with a baby, but luckily he's a pretty cool kid. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to give you an hour talking something fucking crazy after I talk about the most important part of the night. What am I drinking? It is a weekday. I'm not going crazy. I'm drinking a beer. I poured myself a pint. I actually had a couple of they're like Christmas ales from Pelican Brewery in Oregon on the coast. And they're really good. It's still a great beer. It wasn't bottled too long to where it's gross now. It's a dark, nutty Christmas ale. God bless it. Very delicious. And that's what I'm drinking tonight. I'm drinking a beer while I talk. This is music. This is true crime. This is all the things that a good podcast should be about, right? Looking through the Google Trends, trying to figure out what we're going to do next year and how we're going to try to get more listeners, we realized that music was the wrong thing to get into. That nobody is interested in music anymore. Nobody reads about it. Nobody wants to hear people talk about it. It's like one of the one of the subjects that you should steer clear of with podcasting. Unfortunately, it's the only thing I give a shit about. So I'm not going to stop. You know, you don't have to like music to listen to our podcast, especially ones like this where we talk about true crime. And there are 9 kabillion true crime podcasts out there that do really well. So maybe we can be 9 kabillion in one, except for only doing it for one episode because I don't really give a fuck about it. True crime is a fascinating thing, but I don't know. It's like, how many times can you hear the story of Jeffrey Dahmer told? How many people are going to give you something new about Jeffrey Dahmer? Although here I am about to talk about a thing that the only reason I'm talking about it is because a book was made and turns out a movie was made about it. I will be the 756th person to be podcasting about this, I'm sure. But I'm me, so I'm much more interesting. Anyway, I'm drinking a beer. We're going to talk about the black metal murders. In 1994, a gentleman by the name of Varg Vikernes, he gave himself the name Varg Vikernes. His original name was Christian Vikernes. He also went by all these fucking guys, and I'll talk about who these fucking guys are, gave themselves nicknames, his being Count Grizhnak, which, my God, Christian Vikernes is much more of a... If you're going to be in metal, I feel like Christian Vikernes is a fucking perfect name. I don't know why he changed it, but hey, Varg Vikernes was put in prison in 1994 for the murder of Oystein Erseth, aka Euronymous, of the black metal band Mayhem. Now, I knew the smallest bits of stuff about this. I knew the smallest bits in the sense that the Norwegian black metal scene back in the day, in the late 80s, was fucking nuts. But I didn't know the specifics until I honestly don't even remember what got me into it. But I ended up getting a book. I ended up watching a documentary. I have just been obsessed this year. So I'm going to talk about it. So any of you people that don't know the details of the Norwegian black metal murders, you're going to find out now. That's next on First Chorus First. We'll be right back. It's kind of a good teaser, I guess. I could do a better teaser, right? In the early 90s, metal was all the rage in Norway. But did all that rage lead to murder? Find out next. Bum, bum, bum. We are back. So in order to understand the story that I'm about to talk about, you need to understand 2 things. You need to understand Norway, and you need to understand that European region, and you also need to understand the subgenres of metal. It's interesting, and it's needed. It's also massive, and I know that metal fans are going to freak out no matter what I say. Even if I was spot on and dead right, which there is no right or wrong because this stuff is so ambiguous, people will definitely find a problem with what I'm saying. That mixed with the fact that I really don't know that much of what I'm talking about. I like metal. I've liked metal for a long time. I'm at an age where I grew up enjoying the very specific bands and then getting into other metal bands and kind of dabbing my toe into, oh, what is this Dream Theater thing my music buddies keep talking about? Who is this Mastodon? I know metal, but I don't know metal. Not the way like Evil does, and I don't really care to. Point being is that there's a kabillion subgenres that all elitist fans are crazy about. So no matter what, I'm going to mess it up. And I apologize, and I also don't care. What I'll go through quickly is Norway itself, at the time that this happened, late 80s, early 90s, was 88% Protestant. So 88% Protestant Christian. It was a very high class, it still is. It is a high class, lots of money, very, very, very low crime rates, on paper, amazing place to live. The only thing that I could find, look, great place to live, and I'm sure it is an amazing place to live, probably much better than where we live. At this point, who knows what the fuck's gonna happen? I'm not gonna say anything about it, but while I am recording this, I think we are 3 days removed from the attempted assassination of Trump. I honestly have no fucking idea what's going to happen over the next 3 months with this country. No clue. None of you do. Anybody that says they do is a liar. But something is going to happen. My point is that this region of Europe on paper looks amazing until you get to one thing that I started reading about, and that is how high the censorship rate is in these countries. I honestly don't know if it still is. I pulled all of these stats from the early 90s, late 80s, because I wanted to get a feel for what the time was like when all this shit happened. And they are very, very high on censoring. I mean, we're talking zero violence in art, no gore, no blood, nothing like that. Think like United States in the 60s and 50s as far as sexuality. It's the equivalency of that. Very, very strict. Out of movies is all censored. Horror films, no gore, nothing like that. A lot of that stuff, kids in those countries, it is hard to get your hands on. It's like basically porn for them, watching, fucking Hostel, the horror film. I thought that was really interesting and really telling for a few reasons that we'll get into later regarding these murders. One of the things that you hear in the interviews and in the book that these guys are talking about all the time is how they were always watching violent things and they were getting their hands on horror movies and snuff films and all this stuff, and to them it was this big symbol of how rebellious they were. We were so badass that we were watching the goriest movies you could possibly watch. With, I don't know, to us it's like that's just kind of fucking whatever, par for the course. There's 700 podcasts about that. And snuff films, I mean, those aren't real. Like, unless you're in some billionaires club, some weird fucking, what was that HBO show called? The first season was really good. The other ones are not. Something investigator. You know what I'm talking about. The snuff films that a bunch of fucking poor death metal from Denmark kids would be able to get their hands on are definitely fake. Sorry guys, sorry to disappoint you. The other thing that I want to talk about before getting into the actual story is the history of metal itself, which you can go all the way back. Look, metal comes down to one thing. How can you piss off your parents? How can you scare your parents? How can you scare old people? That is what metal is. And it originated, you can go as far back as fucking the blues. In fucking Chicago, Memphis, Willie Johnson, people playing the devil's music. Because that's the main thesis of rock and roll, any genre of rock and roll, is how do I get old people to think that I'm the devil? And that's the answer. You could go all the way back to Howlin' Wolf, up to the psychedelic, the Kinks, Cream, until you get to the 60s and you get to the Black Sabbath. I mean, there were other bands that we'll talk about. Coven, which was more psychedelic rock, but super, super heavy. If you go back and you listen to some of that Yardbirds stuff or going over to Cream or Deep Purple, there's heavy shit there. But what really, really opened the door, what really, really did it, that I'm sure people listening to this know, Sabbath being the biggest influencer, this metal genre, along with Zeppelin and Deep Purple. Zeppelin, the reason that Zeppelin, I think, could be called more influential is because how much Zeppelin liked singing about fucking Vikings raping and pillaging and fucking Lord of the Rings shit and stuff like that. That was what all of this metal wanted to be about. Incomplete. They were all about that shit. It's basically Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin being the big influencers of this stuff, leading us to all the subgenres that started to break out with your punk metal. Your Motorhead was the mid 70s. You had bands like Iron Maiden and Saxon started coming around. You had bands, actually, you know what? I'll start with the heavy metal genres. As far as the genres, like I said, I'm only going to go through a few of them, like the seven basic sin, the seven deadly sins. I guess we'll go with the seven deadly sins. The metal fans would love that, right? The 7 deadly types of metal. Also, it is the number of sins there are, and that is cool, according to people that love metal, because they like silly things like that. You could pull this off of Wikipedia, but they talk about them also in the book that I read for this, and I guess I'll stop here and say it now. Lords of Chaos by Mikhail Moynihan and Diedrich Soderlund. It is now probably one of my 20 favorite books I've ever read. The book is so fucking good. It is so amazing at telling you exactly, I don't want to say exactly what happened because there's so much hearsay involved in this shit. There's so many people saying so many different things that are probably bullshit. They do such a good job of not even implying, but just here's what this person's quote was. Now here's what these three people's quotes were. Now here's what the police report said. So you get to judge for yourself who's full of shit and who isn't. Now, this is all aimed, but it's aimed for good reason, because there are clearly people in this story that are pieces of shit, and it needs to be pointed. But this book does such a good job of you being able to pick up the nuances without it telling you what the nuances are. It is serious. It is in depth. It tries really hard to be as accurate as it can. It's fucking hilarious. It is so goddamn funny. I have rarely laughed out loud reading a book the amount of times I did reading this. And it's all because it's mostly just direct quotes from these insane, stupid fucking kids in this genre in the late 80s, early 90s. It's just so funny. We are far enough removed that we've seen, characters in movies and stuff, but my God, these people wanted to be the real thing so bad, and it's hilarious. They talk about the breakdown of some of the subgenres of metal. You have doom metal. You have bands like Cathedral. Typo Negative would be one. I actually saw Typo Negative and I thought they were great. I don't know what any of these subgenres actually mean. I am half convinced that none of you do either. Doom metal, I guess, is kind of like sludge metal. So I guess you're thinking like Sleep, Caius, bands like that. Slow, sludgy, dirty, low guitars played for stoners. You have power metal, Hammerfall and fucking Rhapsody of Fire and Catharsis and all these. It's not quite progressive metal, but it's like, Evil always talks about he wants his fucking music that would be played while he's riding a steed into battle and shit like that. And that's what I think of when I think of this sort of thing. All these genres could be called one another depending on the band. You could call fucking Dream Theater power metal, but it's more progressive than power metal. And there's Queensryche and Rush. Is Rush metal? Is Rush not metal? I don't know. Now we have death metal, and definitely don't call death metal black metal, because those guys will go, okay, so I'll do that after I'm done with this whole thing. Necrophagia, Possessed, Morbid Angel. We've actually talked about death metal on the pod because Evil brought us the band Death, Death is one of the bands that has kind of been declared one of the founders of the most extreme type of metal. Early 80s Death, who were out of Florida, I think. Yeah, they were out of Florida. But they were one of the ones that got really into, for whether joking or not, leaning heavily on not just the satanic side of things, but the violent satanic head of things. And in fact, Morbid Angel ended up having neo-fascist imagery. What do they call it? Anarcho-punk. Shitty bands like fucking Napalm Death. You have thrash metal, okay? You got your Metallica, your Megadeth, your Slayer. Let's play as hard and fast as we can. And that was the shit that really hit off in America. That was the shit that got America to stand up and say, oh, I like ye. And then we have bands coming out of black metal. We have Venom, which was kind of the first band. There's Mayhem, which we're going to talk about. Burzum, which we're going to talk about. Bathory, which we're going to talk about. Hellhammer. These are the black metal bands out of Europe. It was just all about death and Satan and Old Testament Christianity. Life is one big bloodbath in hell, and if you think anything differently, I think you should die. I probably said a ton of wrong things there. Metalheads are fucking psycho, and I think that it stems from this genre. I think in the late 80s and early 90s, there was such a need to grasp on and hold the title of what the trueness really was. Metal was real metal and what was fake, and why are you listening to Poison or Napalm Death or whatever other fake ones that we'll talk about. There's never been a genre more, with the exception of maybe 90s rap, was obsessed with are you real or are you a poser, to a violent end in some ways. The biggest thing that happened was these people that are, I'm real. No, you're the poser. No, I'm real. Just trying to fucking one-up each other. And that's all this was, is one-upping and one-upping and one-upping until you get as far as you can. Well, I'm going to raise up my fucking hand with the horns. Well, I'm going to fucking bite a bat's head off on stage. Well, I'm going to pour pig's blood all over the fans. Well, I'm going to fucking slit my wrist while I'm on stage. Well, I'm going to fucking murder a gay person. This is what happened to this genre. And that last thing I threw in wasn't just semantics. That is literally where this story went to. So let's get to it. And all you metalheads that are already mad, write me. Tell me where I'm fucking wrong. I don't think I am. Most of what we're going to be talking about happened all between like 1990 and 93 in Norway. The Norwegian black metal scene was fucking apeshit. What was going on simultaneously, pretty much not worldwide, but most of the world, definitely in the States, definitely in Europe, was the Satanic Panic. Legitimately parents freaking out, thinking that the devil was at, certain Christians, the Christian right, whatever you want to call it, I shouldn't say still, maybe they still are, I don't know. I just noticed it more when I was a kid. We're still dumb enough to believe that Satan was taking over people and making them do heinous things. They were big in the United States, but the United States had a lot of shit going on at the time we had other things going on. Honestly, we had East Coast versus West Coast, which was, this was intense, but East Coast versus West Coast was more entertaining. It was fucking cooler. The guys in the East versus West Coast situation were flaunting money. They were good looking dude. The fucking guys doing this shit in Norway were losers. They were absolute losers. And what I mean by that's when I was that age, I still am a loser, but I was one of those losers. I don't mean just because they were skinny white kids, which they were. They were pasty, skinny white kids, which who cares? I'm talking about the fact that they didn't have any goals beyond proving that they were better than those around them. But they weren't doing anything to help the case beyond fucking making sure their clothes were dirty. I mean, East Coast is West Coast. They've got showing how much money they have. They're wearing bulletproof vests. These guys are, before I go onto the show, I will have you bury me so I smell like dirt the most while I was screaming on the stage. It's just a different fucking lame, hilarious child thing. Now, not to say that black metal, death metal, that sort of stuff didn't get bigger in the States later on. It did. Once we started to get the internet and people started to, people like Evil got to hear black metal. Yeah, fucking US guys love it. Are you kidding me? These guys that want to just, Evil has really leaned into the whole jacked and tan, and if you aren't listening to metal, you're a pussy sort of thing this year. Further and further every day. And I hear tell that this stuff's really fun to get jacked to. Really fun to work out to, which is funny because towards the end they're very anti, working out is like, if you are working out more to get buff, you're wasting your energy for nothing. That's literally what they're saying. I feel like I should keep doing that voice because it's really fun and I've had a couple beers, so why the hell not? During the Satanic Panic, there were over 12,000 unsubstantiated cases of satanic ritual abuse. Fucking senators and Canadian psychiatrists and shit that were getting famous for talking about recovered memory therapy and sexual abuse that was done because of the occult or satanic rituals, it was all bullshit. But this, like I said earlier, gave the young kids something to latch on to. Learning, this is the sort of shit the parents are scared of. Well, what should we do? And what they should do was figured out first by a band called Venom. who started the whole thing in 1982. The whole, like, super over. I mean, like I said, Ozzy Osbourne was the founder of this shit, but Venom was the first band that said, we are going to base our band. Like, okay, if you go back and you listen to Black Sabbath's lyrics, like, listen to War Pigs. War Pigs is not satanic. War Pigs is an anti-war song. It's about how evil the people are that plan wars, making other people go fight them for them. It's not Satanist. He's using metaphors of generals as witches in black masses. It's not literally Satanism. Venom started the overt Satanism, pentagrams, goats, theatrics. When we get on stage, we're going to have spikes and we're going to be bloody and blah and stick our tongue out. It was taking that whole Ozzy Osbourne Kiss thing one step farther. The big thing about Venom, though, and if you read the interviews with Venom, and you can find them easy on the internet, so just go look. Venom did not take their own shit seriously. Venom knew that this was how we were going to get paid. Like, this was fun. We were having fun. It's like Kiss. Kiss didn't put their fucking face paint on, dress themselves up like fucking kitty cats because it was a satanic thing. It was fun. It was a way to get noticed. It was sparkly. It was the shiny thing that gets people into the store. Venom knew that. Venom was fucking awesome. If you listen to them or go read their interviews or listen to some of their interviews, they were fucking rad. They were such cool dudes. They also kind of started the whole, if you were in a metal band, you changed your name. Kronos and Abandon. When it's their real names are all like fucking Chad and Greg and like super white prep boy names. Like Kronos? No, okay, Chad, whatever. That's cool. Around the same time, you had King Diamond, who started the whole corpse paint thing. Corpse paint this was kind of where, to me, the start of there was one reason that if you listen to a lot of these interviews, a lot of these Norwegian black metal guys that became extremists fall back on, that I get where they're coming from. I think that they are incredibly misguided and their moral code is very misplaced, but I get it. It all stems to me from the corpse paint. Corpse paint it wasn't just some guy that's like, oh, you know what looks cool is if I do like the clown face makeup like on The Crow, or I put black paint around my eyes and white. It has deep cultural roots in Norse mythology. It was essentially, there were specific bands of Vikings that would paint their faces like traditional ghouls, extremely pale with hollow sunken eyes, like dark charcoal in their eye sockets and stuff like that, because they wanted to look like dead souls when they were coming to pillage they understood the war tactics of terrifying people. They had to be big and bloody and screaming and wailing, and they would make like wolf noises and shit, and you had them running into your village looking like corpses. This all came from their culture. And King Diamond was the first one. It's like, hey man, that's pretty cool. If we're trying to do metally scary people stuff, let's do that. And then after King Diamond and the face paint started to become more of a thing, which once again, it's not like Kiss hadn't been doing it, Bathory comes out with the first black metal album. Well, they also brought a lot of Nazism into it. So now, okay, here's the thing about Nazism. It's never a good thing, right? But does it grab people's attention? Does it piss people off? Yes. And like I said at the beginning, what was the goal of these people? All generations, they're looking for a way to piss us off. The parents, they're looking for a way to scare the parents. Whenever you talk about hardcore punk or hardcore metal and the problems with it, one of the things that it's easy to bring up is a lot of these bands end up, Evil and I have talked before about Pantera unfortunately becoming the soundtrack for a lot of fucking douchebags. When I was in high school, in my personal high school, the guys that listened to Pantera were fucking assholes. When I was in my 20s and I would go to a party and some guy that would have a goatee and a shaved head and he'd turn on Pantera, I'd know where things were going and I'd leave because I know it was about to get ugly or fights are going to break out or shit like that. Bands like that unfortunately became a symbol for that in no fault of their own. We've also talked about this a lot on the pod, so I keep saying that, but I know that there are going to be some people that had listened to this episode that haven't listened to others. Pantera didn't want to be that. You know, Dimebag Darrell was one of the coolest motherfuckers that ever lived. He was a love everybody type of guy. Yeah, absolutely. These bands, most of these bands didn't want to be anything like that. It was very, very rare for, you know, when you started getting into neo-punk and shit like that, these bands they weren't popular. These, you know, Hitler Youth bullshit, stupid, bored American things. It was by no fault of most of these bands. But some of these bands did it to themselves. And some of these bands brought the Nazism. You know, the same thing happened to punk. A lot of neo-Nazis were into the hardcore punk because it's fast and it's violent and it's loud. But do you think a band like Black Flag wanted to have anything to do with that? No. That said, I mean, Selective Memory, Johnny Rotten, Sex Pistols' own greatest punk band of all time, some would say, one of his favorite shirts that he wore all the time was a fucking Nazi shirt. And of course, if you asked him, it's not about what is Nazi, what is wrong, what is right, what is racist, it was about dressing offensively. How could I offend people? Part of the traditional punk trend, part of the origination of punk was saying that they refused to be your symbol, that a Nazi symbol was anything that I want it to be, was that I don't get to, you know, your agenda is that I shouldn't talk about Nazis. My agenda is that I can do whatever the fuck I want. I'm not inciting anything. If somebody chooses to be incited by what I'm doing, that's their fucking problem. And I am 50-50 on that. I kind of see it both ways. I think if you're famous, you have a responsibility, but do you though? People don't say fuck the Sex Pistols. Dude, that dude, he wore a swastika on his shirt all the fucking time. Was he a Nazi? No. He didn't do it because he was a Nazi. He did it because it pissed people off. Now, does that matter? I don't know. I'm not the judge of that. Bathory did that sort of symbolism from what they say afterwards, when being asked after, that they did it for the same reasons. They weren't Nazis. They didn't give a fuck about race or things like that. They were using the brand because it was pissing them off. In fact, one of the guys in Bathory that I think is probably total bullshit, but one of their big things was everybody should be using Nazi symbolism again to, for lack of a better term, win it back. Certain symbols that maybe originally weren't known for, you know, that the Nazis took from other points of religion, which is true. Every single symbol that the Nazis had was originally something else that was not a violent religion. What he said anyway was that, hey, the more we use these Nazi symbols, the less power we give it. I think it's bullshit. I think that it's just either a way to sell albums, or the people really were fucking racist as shit. You hear a lot of the things that these people say, and it's the same tired rhetoric that you get everywhere else. It's Aryan thinking, it's the Jews own this and that, blah, 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 blah. I think half the bands did it just to piss people off. Half the people had weird fascination, you know, like fucking Johnny. Oh, I don't want to say which one, but I'm 99% sure that it's Johnny Ramone. And I'm going to fuck up the name. Had an obsession with like fucking SS outfits, SS hats, and he'd wear them he wasn't a fucking Nazi. He just was obsessed with the look and the gear. I mean, he wouldn't be the first young gentleman obsessed with World War II. We all get obsessed with World War II, right? And maybe his obsession was added a little, you know, Ramones was New York City Jewish people. I could see kind of getting obsessed with it in a dark kind of way. But we all know and love the song "The KKK Took My Baby Away," right? By the Ramones. It was Johnny, because Joey wrote that about Johnny stealing his girlfriend. In a joking way, he was calling Johnny KKK because he was obsessed with Nazi memorabilia. I feel like there's a mix up there. I feel like there's something missing there, because I see a lot of Ramones t-shirts going around on a lot of people that I feel like are supposed to be very woke. So where's the fire here, people? That's fucking weird to me. I was in a play once. It was, God, I fucking hated doing it, but I was a Nazi in it. I had to dress up as a Nazi. I dressed up in an SS uniform. The fucking uncomfortability, even for a stupid fucking play around, you know, any of you that have ever done theater, they're the most open-minded, soft people ever. They're not going to judge anybody. Nobody's going to judge them, blah, 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 blah. I was so uncomfortable just being in that. And what was also funny is when you were in the uniform, people were different. People would kind of maybe avoid you a bit. In America, we have learned a lot recently about pendulum swinging politics. It happens very severely with us. Something going way too well, and it pisses people off. So they start to make up terrible shit. So they start to do kind of terrible shit that swings the other way, and then eventually it autocorrect. And I'm not saying one side is better than the other, but there's a history in everywhere. Things get way too conservative, and then they swing to being way too liberal, and then they swing to... This happens in music as well. And it's why you get, Nazi punk turning into people like, Black Flag, where there's this responsibility to be anti-Nazi punk. And all of that just to try to explain that there are a shit ton of genres of this music. And there are a ton of really, really good artists that are doing it for the right reasons in metal. And then there are artists like the artists we're going to talk about. All this helps lead. I don't want to say all this leads because they started in the mid 80s. They started in 84 to a band called Mayhem. Mayhem, which was one of, if not the most notorious black metal bands in Norway. They were founded in Langhus, Norway. The members originally were Euronymous, of course, we already talked about, Mannheim, and Necrobutcher, who was the bass player. Eventually in 88, Hellhammer would join, who was just another fucking just great guy. And then in 88, we had another person join that was a really big deal in this story. Mayhem quickly skyrocketed to be one of the most important metal bands in Europe. And a lot of it had to do with Euronymous' realization that this could be marketed heavily. But in order to do that, they really had to believe in what they were singing about. They had to believe in the Mayhem. They released a demo which did really, really fucking well. First off, Mayhem's music, I fucking like it. It's gritty. It's so gritty. It's like so bad on purpose. Probably not on purpose. These were fucking broke ass kids in their broke ass basements. Not broke basements. Their parents were just fine and giving them plenty of money. But it was one of those bands that if you go in and you listen, it's super dirty, but it's good. I think it's good, man. It's not as good as some of the other ones, like Venom's rad, but it's still good. Mayhem brought the world to believe that they believed in so many things that I will discuss, and this is what led them to the beyond nihilist, the angry thought process of everything should be dead. That is why they ended up painting their faces and, wearing black and loving blood and slitting wrists. When the truth is, I think a couple of them just really fucking like Kiss and were like, man, we should paint our faces. The band was all about Euronymous and doing they're just young fucking kids. These are all 16, 17-year-olds that are going around like, we should wear black and be pale and wear face paint and make really hard metal. And then we should do things like kill a mouse and take a picture and make it our EP cover. It was stupid fucking boy shit. And then in 1988, Per Olin joined, otherwise known as Death, as their vocalist. And here's where shit really starts to hit the fan. Let's talk some more Mayhem. Let's talk what happened with Death, why Euronymous was a piece of shit for it. Enter a couple other characters, some more pieces of shit, and everybody just pieces of shit with each other until the pieces of shit maximize their shittiness. And they still are to this day, some of them. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back and thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed that last track. That last track is off the 1993 EP by Mayhem, The EP is titled Death Crush, and of course the song, I hope y'all enjoyed it, Chainsaw Guts Fuck. That is the real name. I am not kidding. When Dead joined, they had a very good, very full band. Dead was a good singer. He was a great singer for Mayhem for more than one reason. And the main reason being that Dead was the fucking perfect character. He really believed in this shit. He believed in death. He was the one I was talking about that wanted to be... He would bury his clothes the night before a gig so that he would smell like the earth or death, as he would say. He would try to get his bandmates to bury him alive before shows so he would be caked in dirt and all this shit like that. He got in the band by sending them a letter with a fucking crucified mouse on the letter asking to be in the band, saying that he wanted to do what they did. This was the shit that was, wow, that's really impressive. He didn't just ask to be in the band. He got a mouse and cut him and said, hey, I'll crucify you. And I think we let him in. They all ended up living together in this fucking cabin in the woods. For real. Like just a cabin in the woods where they would kind of practice, but mostly just go around and like Euronymous would shoot guns and they would, talk about death. But Death, the person, Death, was obsessed with death. To the point that he would always talk about dying. Always. He would always talk about dying. He would talk about people dying. He would cut himself all the time. There was one time in the middle of a show, he gashed the shit out of himself. And people knew that he was going to do this too. I don't want to say it was a big deal because a lot of these gigs, there were like fucking 30 people at. So it wasn't like he was on, hey, Instagram, if you come to Wembley, I will, slut my wrists and all you get to see. It was like fucking 30 people. And he told people coming up, like, I'm going to do it. I'm really going to, you don't believe me, I'm going to do it. And in the middle of the show, he fucking gashed his wrist. He gashed it so badly and then kept doing the gig that by the time he got to the fucking hospital, they couldn't even work on it properly. They had to disinfect it and do all this shit. They couldn't even stitch him up until like 2 days later or something like that. So he was just at home like hanging out with these fucking dirty ass dudes with this gashed wrist. That was Death. He was obsessed with it. And Euronymous would always play to it. Euronymous loved it because Euronymous saw it as kind of what they should be about. All these bands, they were all about death and violence and blood and guts and Satan. And so when Death finally killed himself, which he did in 1991, this is what brought everything into the peak madness, and it stayed that way for a few more years. Death killed himself in their cabin when he was by himself. He slit both of his wrists and then he blew his head off with a shotgun that they had there. Euronymous was the first one to find him. Euronymous had to go through a window. The door was locked. He had to go through a window, found him with his fucking head blown off. What does he do? Call the cops? No. He goes into town. He buys a disposable camera. He takes pictures of Death. He moves certain things around so that the pictures look cooler or whatever you want to call it, because he intends to and does eventually use the picture as a cover for an EP, an album, whatever. He's like, I got to get pictures of this. This was the type of guy Euronymous was. Euronymous even took fragments of Death's skull, made necklaces out of them. Made necklaces out of Death's skull and would randomly hand them out to people that he dubbed to be worthy of being in the black metal scene. Because at this time, it was either at this time or it was very near this time, Euronymous' parents had bought him a record store. And it was kind of perfect because it was a place where Euronymous could headquarter and all these fucking boys could come hang out and, listen to music, but not the good music, not the shitty, the real metal. We only have the real metal. His record store was called Helveta, and it was kind of where he would reign supreme. It was where he would safeguard. He would be the decider of what was real and what wasn't. And he would be the guy that, I have this necklace with a real skull. Maybe I give you one. Maybe you deserve it because your metal is real. How much do you like Mayhem? This was the fucking type of guy Euronymous was. And if you listen to interviews, if you read the book, this isn't just like one person's like, he was kind of, everybody's like, this dude was a fucking piece of shit. Death, it's a fucking bummer about Death. There's only one person in this book and in the interviews I found where everybody's like, he was just a good dude. He was fucking crazy, but he was really, like, nobody had a bad thing to say about Death. It's not kind of it's a fucking bummer. Like I don't know. If you're obsessed with death and all you want to do is kill yourself and you kill yourself, I'm kind of good for you. I don't know if that's the meaning to your life. Who the fuck am I to judge? But it is a bummer that it seems like the one good person that out of this whole story that actually fucking lived what he meant had to fucking be the first one out. The big problem was that's how Euronymous used this. Death had a good sense of fucking humor too. I don't have written down what his suicide note, but it was something along the lines of, "Sorry boys, excuse the blood." Seriously, that was his suicide note. He seems like a cool fucking dude. Now, Euronymous, on the other hand, in an interview straight afterwards, and I don't have the direct quote in front of me, but a lot of this is, I'm off the dome, you guys. This is just who I am. It was very, death was a punishment because of what all of you fake metal people are doing to the industry. It just made him want to kill himself. Just fucking like trying to glorify the death and turn the death into some marketing fucking, like, that was his reaction to Death's death, with the exception of not caring so much that he took pictures and shit like that. When he told Necro Butcher, the bass player at the time, he called Necro Butcher and he was like, guess what? Death did like the coolest thing. He killed himself. Seriously, that is the way he said it to Necro Butcher. And Necro Butcher was a real person. He was horrified. His friend fucking killed himself. He was inconsolable, while Euronymous is, just blaming it on bands like Napalm Death. A lot of this comes about, we talked about how good life was and still is in a lot of these locales in Europe. It talks a little bit of the psychology in the book, and I read more about it online. It's interesting how far humans will go to find something to rebel against. These kids, these are fucking wealthy secular kids, and life was just too good. Life was so good that you have to find something to either rebel against or be depressed about. You have to have all your emotions working. You have to express anger at some point. You have to express depression at some point. You have to be sad at some point, no matter how quote unquote good your life is. And this was Varg, which we're about to start talking about. Varg was arrested at one point for some church burnings, which we're going to talk about. He complains in an interview about the prison. Everybody has their own bed and their own toilet, and I asked them to put me in a dungeon because that's what prison should be. This is who these fucking people are. This was also around the same time, like right after Death's suicide, that Varg comes in. Varg with his quote unquote band. His band Burzum is just him. So it's not a band, it's just him. He just records his own stuff and puts it out by himself. His dad worked for Saddam Hussein. His dad helped manipulate economic software back when Saddam was in charge. And so surprisingly, and Varg's mom and dad were pretty okay with it. Varg was pretty big into fucking Nazism, and he was obsessed with weapons and guns and ammo. And in fact, in interviews, he has said that he excitingly, like, I was the guy, I sent Mayhem ammo when we were in contact, and I was telling them how much I liked their band. I sent them ammo, and that's the ammo that Death used to kill himself. He said this in interviews, excited, like, Death used my bullets to kill himself, which is more than likely bullshit, because 98% of the shit that this fucker says is completely stupid. Varg Vikernes is one of the biggest fucking asshats ever. We'll get into what he did, but he's a free man right now. He has a YouTube. You can go watch it. It's fucking mind-numbingly stupid. It's also very typical. It's stuff that isn't surprising. He hates America. He hates Jews. He's obsessed with He's obsessed with Lord of the Rings, but he sees it as real, I am more of an orc because the orcs are real and they are from the earth, and the elves are the Jews and they are the ones, like, this is shit that he talks about. Anyway, enter Varg closely after Death's death. and Helveta, the store, becomes a thing. Varg and Euronymous become fast friends. They become very close and they start hanging out all the time. And, Euronymous is just fucking loves Varg because Varg is all about the intensity of the metal and making it true. And one of the ways that they made it true is burning churches. Between 1992 and 1995, something like, I think 25 churches were burnt. Starting on the 23rd of May, 1992, they lit fire to Stortvit Church. And then June 6th, where they did successfully burn down Fantoft Stave Church. It has not been proven, but Varg Vikernes is the prime suspect for this one. And a lot of these guys, including a guy named Faust, who's going to come into the story as well, Euronymous, Varg, this is one of the things when I was talking about them one-upping each other. Well, I will do this. Well, I will do this. Well, why don't we burn churches? And this is what they start doing. They start burning a lot of churches around Sweden in that area. First off, because a lot of these old churches in this area are wooden, so they're easily burnable. Two things. Number one, if I believed the reason they said they were doing this, I don't think it's right, but I could see the reasoning. The burning of the churches all stemmed from them wanting to go back to beliefs that were before their initial ancestors. We're talking Norse mythology. We're talking when Thor had fucking 87 names and they were praying to the gods of this and the gods of that. A lot of these kids, one of the things they decided to fucking hate is Christianity, because Christianity came to these places and forced themselves upon these people. Christianity was not chosen by these people's ancestors. It was forced upon them. Stop me if you've heard that one before. So these kids looked at these churches. It's the equivalency of fucking Native Americans probably walking by somewhere where their fucking ancestors used to live and seeing a fucking Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It pissed me the fuck off. This was the reason they said that they were doing this. Years and years and years of becoming numb to the fact that this culture was forced upon us and completely deleted our culture. It was burning to get things back into the soil, to show Odin to the people. That's what they said they were doing. I should say that's what Varg Vikernes said he was doing, who was just a fucking... He would say anything. He just runs his mouth all day and says whatever comes up in it. He's the fucking Donald Trump of black metal. Like whatever comes up in his head at the time, doesn't matter if it's true or not, or going to do damage or not, or going to help or not. He's just gonna, burning of churches is great. It's done great things for everybody. Everybody loves it. It's no different than most stupid people leaders. In the end, it's just a bunch of little boys running around being pyromaniacs. There's also around this time is when the stories become a lot of hearsay. There's so many articles built around what some of these people say that are full of shit. So the only thing we know for sure are the actual crimes that happen, and it's pretty easy to put together when these happen. And this is where it starts to go from funny to serious. Because, I mean, obviously we've already had a suicide and things like that, but look, these are stupid kids doing stupid things. Metal is such a stupid genre. It is. You guys are so fucking dumb. You really are. You take your shit so seriously and you're all such gatekeepers. I know that a lot of you are probably tuning in to this podcast just for this. Or maybe you want to go back and listen to our 72 seasons reaction. I hope you go listen to the other episodes of the pod. We love metal. I love metal. We talk about it. We love it. But man, a lot of the fucking metal fans can be so fucking stupid. You're idiots. When you build this culture of, in order to be real this, you have to do this. When you get into fucking like gang initiation and shit like that, I don't know what it is in our DNA, in our fucking heritage, in our instinct that makes us feel like we have to do this shit. But as dudes, we do, and it's so fucking dumb. Church burnings, whatever. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world until you get to 92, and I don't even have his name in front of me, and sorry. In fact, I don't even think they put his name in the book. But in December 25th, Christmas, 1992, in Sarpsborg, a firefighter fucking died putting out one of these church fires. So now we are at the point where these kids are fucking murdering people. Whatever with death, maybe he was egged on, encouraged, he still killed himself. Now we have a fucking firefighter who's dead because of these morons. Morons like Faust. Not that Faust. Not the guy who made the deal with the devil. No, this lame fuckface painted drummer Faust. These are the type of people that got into the ranks that ruined everything. It's much more metal nowadays than it was, but like in the 80s, it was very, very punk. People like Dark Throne that have come out with straight up Aryan black metal. Well, Faust, who was the drummer for Emperor, was walking home from drinking in 1992. He was solicited by a gay man who he said okay, and they went off into the woods, and Faust stabs him 37 times. 37 times. He ended up getting caught because he told like multiple people. The first people he told were Varg and Euronymous, who did nothing about it. They did nothing. Emperor was signed to... So Euronymous at this time, he had his store. He also had a record label. Once again, another way to fucking gatekeep everything. He told them, they did nothing. They all did the church burnings together. This all leads to Faust murdering Magna Andreasen, who was the gay person. In fact, Hellhammer, who's the other nice piece of shit that was from Mayhem himself, said he was honored by what the murder represented. Faust was put in prison for this murder, stabbing somebody 37 times in 94. He served 9 years and he got out. And there's going to be another... Look, Sweden, I guess the fucking crime rate is so low for a reason. But my God, if you want to murder somebody, murder them in Sweden. Because you're gonna do 7, 8, 9 years, but you will be back out eventually. So if somebody does something terrible to you, get some Swedish residency, have them come visit, bam. I mean, you're going to do some time, but you are going to get out. You are definitely going to get out. To be clear, I agree with, I am very, very much a, not only innocent until proven guilty, I'm very much a, once you serve your time, you served your time. You know, the whole point of prison, I mean, the whole point of prison is money. Boy, we're really getting into it, aren't we? I believe in second chances. But these, when you hear any of these fuckers talk, there is zero remorse. Zero remorse for anything that they did at all. So now at this point, the fucking one-upping that I've been talking about is, we're at an 11. We're at the, oh yeah, well, I fucking stabbed a gay dude 37 times. I don't know if I talked enough about this or even talked about this, but I'm sure it's just assumed because these guys have these Nazi-ist, fascist leanings that they hate gay people, which starts to be a problem because Euronymous starts to he starts to enjoy the company of Varg quite a bit. He starts to, you know, it'd be really evil, Varg, if Varg also starts to kind of try to do the power move of taking over Euronymous. This is when Varg starts to kind of see the politics and being able, thinking he can kind of topple Euronymous. He starts talking to the media all the time, which of course the media loves. A fucking black metal guy talking about death and down with gay people and all this shit, and Varg using pictures of one of the church burnings for a cover of an EP. That's how he got arrested for arson. He was arrested for arson of a church burning because he had a picture of it, used it as photo as an EP. He was only in jail for 3 months and then released because there was no actual physical evidence that he started the fire, but he was in prison for 3 months and back out. So now he's like a fucking rapper that goes to jail for having marijuana at an airport. Now it's, I'm a fucking rapper who was in the clink. And this is also when Euronymous' label officially signs Varg Vikernes, Death Like Silence Production. That's Euronymous'. Varg's mom paid for his first album. That was really nice. Like I said, she was all into his fucking Nazism and down with Jews. Sure, I'm cool with that. The problem is that Euronymous was producing all this stuff. He was labeling all this stuff. He was selling it at his record store. He was not paying anyone anything. No royalties, nothing. There's this fight for prominence, and everybody's already pissed off at Euronymous because Euronymous is not giving anyone any fucking money for these albums that they're coming out with. He would do things like he would pay for releases, but he wouldn't pay royalties, or he wouldn't have the ability for a second rollout of a record if it sold out quickly because he already spent the money. And it wasn't even spending the money. It was like a fucking 20-year-old, you know? It wasn't spending the money on fucking bettering the label or anything like that. Spending money on fucking beer and Big Macs. Because of this, the musicians started hating Euronymous. Now the fans still fucking loved him. The fans still saw him as kind of the king of all this. And I think that, mixed with the money thing, pissed off the other musicians, particularly Varg, even more. And this is where we get to August 10th, 1993. People had already been talking about Varg and Euronymous to each other, to other people, I'm going to kill this motherfucker. And, I can't wait to stick him with my knife. If you ask some people, Euronymous sent Varg a letter that was very loving. Not kidding, like fucking hearts on the eyes. Shit like that. Euronymous was kind of like in love with Varg. Hearts on the eyes. No, I'm dead fucking serious. And this was the last straw for Varg, who, with a gentleman named Blackthorn, who had just joined Mayhem, drove up to Euronymous' house, and this is a far drive, middle of the night, to ask about the letter, supposedly. They get to his house. Blackthorn stays in the car. Varg goes up to Euronymous' apartment, and everything at this point is hearsay. According to Varg, Euronymous panicked when Varg started asking him about money, kicked him in the chest. Euronymous then ran into the kitchen to grab a knife, but Varg already had one and stabbed him before he could get there. Euronymous then ran into his room where he kept his shotgun. None of what Varg says about the story makes sense. What makes sense is that Varg went there and fucking murdered his ass. And the reason is because the only thing that there are multiple witnesses saying is that there was a point where Euronymous is running outside screaming for help. You don't do that if you're running to grab a shotgun or a knife, or you kick somebody if you're leading the assault, you're not running out screaming help. At some point in the night, Euronymous is outside in his fucking underwear screaming for help. Varg stabbed Euronymous 23 times. Eventually, Varg even starts lying about how he stabbed him. When it finally happens to where he has to admit that he did it, he's like, yeah, I stabbed him so hard in the skull I couldn't even get my knife out. That's not true. He didn't have any fucking skull. It was all back and shit. They tried very hard to build an alibi where they purposely left a credit card with one of their friends back at home so that the friend would go rent a movie that they'd already seen so they could describe what the movie was successfully, but they left the wrong fucking credit card there so it wouldn't work. They also brought a contract for Bursum, Varg's band, leaving the label, saying that Euronymous tried to kill him for leaving the label, which is all in like Varg's handwriting. I think Varg got a letter from Euronymous that other people saw that was kind of gay, and they were like, well, what the fuck are you gonna do about that? And Varg fucking killed him. Varg fueled theories that it was the Swedes that have been feuding with Euronymous that killed him. Eventually, he got arrested. There was a 16-year-old female that was living with Euronymous at the time that wouldn't say who he was, but did say that the black metal scene would exact its own revenge and that she knew who killed him. She also was the one that told cops that Faust did the other killings, the gentleman that he took out into the woods and stuff. So a year later, she was the reason he got arrested for that as well, to which he, and I quote, "There's no remorse. I took his life. I paid for it. Not a big deal." So in the end, we end up with Euronymous dead, Varg serving, I think it was 12 of his 21-year prison sentence. He's already out of jail, spouting it, evil will love it. He talks about how selfish bodybuilding is and how important blonde hair is. And his YouTube is like his version of the Turner Diaries. It's fucking weird. Look, black metal isn't all bad. Like any genre, like anything in the world, it's just a few people that make it bad. But this story was too interesting to not talk about, right? I mean, Varg didn't I don't think Varg cared about anything but power. I don't think he gave a fuck about anything but making sure that he was not under Euronymous. I don't think he gave a fuck about money. I don't think he gave a fuck about the music. I don't think he gave a fuck about anything but being higher than Euronymous. And the only way that he could do that was to kill him. Hey, we got some good music out of it. We got mostly really stupid music out of it, but that is, in short, in a very rambling way, what happened in Sweden and how black metal led to some of the shit they actually sing about. I don't know. I'd love to have this conversation with Evil. Now that I've studied this a lot and I've looked at the guys and I've heard their interviews and stuff, it's a lot like fucking wrestling. Really, really dramatic, silly as fuck characters. It's the weirdest thing, just as much as you can watch a chick flick and be like, how the fuck could specific people be into this? It's the same thing. How can you fucking watch wrestling? I guess entertaining at times, but it's just so silly. This is the same fucking thing. It's just another thing ruined by certain people that start to take it too seriously, too far. And some of this stuff's gonna make its way into my rotation, though. Venom was kind of cool shit. That stuff was fun. What I'll end on is Lords of Chaos. The book Lords of Chaos. I haven't seen the movie yet. There's a movie out, and it's one of the McCulkin brothers, who I like. I need to watch it. I'll watch it. I'll tell you guys what I thought of it. The book is fucking amazing. Please read it. It's so good. It does such a better job than I just did, but admittingly, I just wanted to talk about it. Those are the cliff notes. You have the cliff notes. You have why it's interesting. Now go read the book. VerseCourseFirst.com @VerseCourseFirstPod. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening to me ramble. Join us next week. Sven and I are back. We are doing our last episode. Quite the contrary to this episode, we're doing our last episode on Dave Matthews Band. What are we talking about this time? Well, we've already talked about Dave. We've already talked about Carter. Now we're talking about everybody else, and we're capping it off. So we're going to talk a little Leroy, what the fuck happened to Boyd, talk a little Stefan Lassard, a little Tim Reynolds, Butch, everybody else that's kind of been back and forth. And then we're going to cap off our coverage and end our Dave Matthews stuff, with the exception of one other episode. Sorry, a lot of Dave Matthews this year, but there are a lot of talented music there too. Everybody, thanks for listening. Hope you're doing well. Join us next week. Join us every week, every Monday. Join us. We're fun. Much more fun when Evil and Rachel are here. I promise. For all you metalheads that came just to listen to this, thank you. Go back and we talk about metal. It's the only thing that Evil wants to talk about. I promise you that. We call him Evil for a reason. Go back and listen to when we fucking talked to Trevor from Unearth. That's right. That was a fucking fun as hell conversation. Do you guys know Moontooth? You guys know Nick Lee? Go fucking listen to our interview with him. Go listen to us talk about Moontooth multiple times. My favorite current guitar player. Everybody just go have fun. Go love each other. If your music is made for exclusion, I don't know, maybe rethink it just a little bit. I'm not saying your music has to be about inclusion. I think we've gone way too far with that. But like the President of the United States of America once said, you gotta love everybody. Make them feel good about themselves. Take care. Good night. Good luck. Stay right by your side.